Hey, welcome back to the podcast, Evil Dungeon Master AD&D Universe Podcast. I'm your host, DM Vince. Hopefully you're doing well out there today. It is Wednesday. It's time for another podcast. Today we're going to talk a little bit about Advanced Dungeons & Dragons First Edition. But first, ask the DM at theevildm.com is my email address. Theevildm.com is my website where you can sign up for the happenings on my website. Patreon.com/theevildm is where you can go if you want to support me. Been putting up journal pages in there as I write in my DM's journal over things I'm doing currently. As well as you can head over to my YouTube channel, youtube.com/theevildm, and check out my newest video talking about All Flesh Must Be Eaten, the role-playing game. Fun game. Check it out. Zombie apocalypse type game. It was a must-have for most people in the early 2000s. It is still a relevant game today. Anyway, today we're going to turn to the Unearthed Arcana book, page 80, and we're going to talk about the rule in here that you can use called casting spells directly from books. Now, before we had this rule, we had the ability to cast from the book directly. When we did that in our games, and I remember when the great Joe DM was running games, before we had this book out, or he was using this book, he would allow us to read from the actual book. We didn't have traveling. Well, we had traveling books. We just didn't kind of, designate it as such. He would always rule that if you read from the book, the spell would just vanish from the book and be a blank page afterwards. He'd also give you a percent chance for casting it directly from the book, especially if you were in a dire situation, such as you were in the middle of a combat or you were pressured. Now, if it was just that you were casting the spell and there was no pressure or anything, he wouldn't give you the chance to fail. It would just fade away. But the chance to fail was the spell level itself, percentage wise, and I think he based it a minimum of 10%. So there was always a chance that the spell would fail or something. I forget his exact rules because I've never used them ever since then. Because they had this book with this ruling in it, but he gave a minimum of 10% chance of failure during a combat situation, only because of the way combat worked and you were stressed out, or if someone was chasing you or something like that. So I mean, it's interesting how he did that. But in page 80, they have in extreme, the DM may allow a magic user to cast a spell directly from any sort of spell book, just as if it were a scroll. The book must be the appropriate sort so the spell matches the profession of the caster, magic user book, obviously, magic user spell book. The caster must be able to know and use the spell in question. Note that in regard, reading directly from the spell book differs from the use of scroll spells. So you have to know the spell and use the spell in question. When it comes to scrolls, you don't have to exactly know it. You can just cast it by doing it if you're a lower level. And that's when the percentage chance of failure would go up, obviously, if you were too lower levels. When it came to Joe's rules. So if you were like second level and you were casting a 6th level spell, he would add that 6% onto the failure of the 10% that he always used. So direct casting of a spell from a spell book automatically destroys that spell. There is also a 1% chance per level of the spell that the spells immediately preceding and following the spell cast will likewise be destroyed. Now, that's an important thing to note there because I have something to talk about when this is over. There's an additional 1% chance that the casting of the spell directly from the spell book will destroy the entire book. A permanency spell, for example, would not prevent the spell from disappearing when cast in this manner. Even though the writing might remain on the page, the writing will no longer be magical in nature. These strictures apply whether casting a spell is using his or her personal book or the book of another. Read magic is required for one magic user to read another magic user's spell book, and a magic user can learn a spell by reading it from another's book. This learning process requires 2 to 8 hours of study per level of the spell, after which time the spell is learned and thereby immediately usable by the magic user who did the studying. So I've always said that when it comes to books for magic users, every magic user writes it differently. And here is exactly what supports that I've always said. Now, a lot of DMs will allow magic users to immediately read magic user books, like, as just, hey, you're a magic user, or like, hi, you're English, you speak English, you could read an English book, or you're Italian, you could read Italian books. No, it doesn't work that way. Magic users are taught to write things in certain ways by their master who teaches them, and every master has a different way of teaching them, so that every student learns a different way and then kind of makes their own method of writing notes in the book, so only they can read it. And read magic is where that spell comes in, that I think they mostly got rid of later on when it came to this whole situation. But I like that they have this whole process set out here for you. Now, what I wanted to talk about was when we were talking about, let's see here. There's 1% chance of no. There's also 1% chance per spell, per level of the spell, that the spell is immediately proceeding and following the cast of spell like also be destroyed. Now, I brought that up for a reason because I had a player in a game a while back that built I guess he called it a sacrifice book, or just a screw book, whatever. It didn't matter. With one spell per section, he padded spells with blank pages. His plan was to cast from the book daily and argued that there were no adjacent spells to lose. So he was constantly casting from this book in hopes that he would get around the rule. When it came to I'm trying to think of the wording here. When it came to casting the spell, he would not succumb to the 1%. And if he did, there was a blank page because it says proceeding. No, that's not how it works. I had to make a ruling on that with the group and say, listen, it says the next prepared spells in the book, the previous prepared spells in books. It doesn't matter if there is a blank page or not, because that doesn't count as a spell. A blank page is not a spell. So you can't pad the pages with a blank spell to try to get around this whole process. It's just going to skip that blank page and go to the next one. And he argued about this for some time with me, and I finally had to say, it was in the middle of the game too, so I finally had to say, all right, you know what? This is the ruling for now in this game. We'll go with that because I want to play the game and not argue with you. Afterwards, we'll talk about this with the group, and I will make a decision on that. And he was like, oh, all right, cool, because he thought he's going to get away with this whole clever plan. After the game, where we sat around, usually back when I was living in Connecticut, we would, after the game, we would go to the sandwich shop, or the sub shop, as I think they called it, the sub shop there, and we would all like kind of have lunch or dinner depending on what day we were playing, and this was all of us would go. So we'd sit around and we'd talk about the game, and people would ask me questions, things like that, tell me what they thought about the game. It was a great feedback slash, bullshit session that we have with friends. That's what friends do. Usually after games, they generally, hang out for a little while and chat or something like that. So we discussed this whole thing, and I said to him, the ruling does state this. It says the next prepared spells in the book. I said, I'm not usually a stickler for things in the book, but this is pretty cut and dry. And what you're doing is kind of trying to get around it by, like, I don't know, screwing the rules. I don't know what you call it, but, and he was just like, well, I think it's fair. I mean, but I said, think about it. The next prepared spells before and after. A blank page is not a prepared spell or a spell. It's a blank page. Now, if you want to pad spells in this book with spells that you don't care about, like lesser spells, and you can keep the good spells in between, then by all means write it that way. And then those spells, if they happen to go away, they go away. And he thought about it and he argued a little bit more, and then I got the group consensus about it. And I said, Well, let's see what the group says, because I'm generally for asking the group. And if you've ever listened to any of my actual play podcasts that I do at rollhigher.die.com, you can see that a lot of times you'll hear in the recording is this, I'll ask the group, what does the group think? Is this fair? And they will answer, and then I'll make a decision. So I asked the group, and the group was just like, dude, yeah, that's not fair. That I mean, even I, who are a pro player, and want to make sure the player gets an edge. One of the guys is like, no, that doesn't work. It says spells, not blank pages. And another guy's like, yeah, unfortunately, it does say spells and not blank pages. So the consensus of the group was the guy was being an idiot. So I made the ruling going forward that blank pages do not shield spells, and it's the next one going forward. But I told him, write, organize your spells on a piece of paper how you want it in the book. I said, write down how you want it. Like, if you want to put like first level spells in between these high level spells that you want to cast, so that if you screw it up, it'll burn those things and you don't really care because you already know those and have those and they're not really that useful. I say put spells in between there that you don't ever really use. So, it's a good tip for there. Some other ways I thought about how a DM can kind of incorporate this into the game, and maybe use it as something other than just the ruling itself. Like, you could place a book that they find in the dungeon, and maybe the magic user's like, oh my god, he reads it and he's just like, this is great spells, but maybe they have to use one of the spells in there later on directly from the book to survive, and they have to risk reading it right directly out of there, so that there's a chance that either they die or they risk the chance of burning the spells that might be really useful in the future. So it's kind of a dilemma situation there. You can also do like this kind of situation where two magic users duel it out, and they would win a prize of whatever, maybe some treasure of some sort of magical weapon, magical item. But they get a book, and they have to burn the spells in a certain amount of time, and burn the book and got the book pretty much out. But the spells have to be used in a way that's useful at the time. So it can't be just like running around casting on random people just to end the book. So the first person that went on this 30-day journey, for example, casting the spells in a useful situation and brought the book back empty or completely blank with no pages of spells, would be the winner. So it might be an interesting idea to do that. Maybe a patron loans the book to a magic user, and the magic user is paying it off. Every time he uses a spell, he has to pay a certain amount as it fades out of the book. And he's not allowed to copy it. Not that he probably will not, but every time he uses a spell from the book, it fades out of the book, and that adds to how much of debt that he has to actually pay when he brings the book back, because it's a loaned book. There's little things like that you can do, but I don't know. Tell me what you think in the comments about this ruling. How do you use it in your games? I kind of use it rules written. I don't really do the whole percentage that it might blow the other spells around it. I just do a percentage failure for the spell, since you're reading it directly uh, with the spell from the book, and percentage chance for a spell over your level. I kind of like that in a sense. I don't know. We'll see. But tell me what you think in the comments. Just want to say, don't forget to go to my website, theevildm.com. Go to my YouTube channel, youtube.com/theevildm. Support me, patreon.com/theevildm. Hopefully you have a great day. Keep it original, keep it old school. Good night, and God bless everybody.